Hey there, this is Becky Moore from PHOTOPLAY Paper. I'm so glad you could join me today. Our newest holiday release of Say It With Stamps has arrived at your favorite retailer. Have you seen them yet? If you haven't, please be sure to check out Amy Sonneman's video tour of all the new stamps, dies, and stencils, as well as the new card size we've introduced to the industry. Links to her videos are in the description below. In our holiday release, we have designed 8 new stencils for Halloween, fall, Christmas, and winter. The snowflakes, fall leaves, and holly berries are all in 2-part stencils, and the rest are single stencils. Today I want to go beyond the basics of stenciling and share with you some tips and tricks you can try to get the most out of your stencils. Let's get started. I love to make see-through window cards. It's such an unexpected surprise when the recipient opens the card and discovers that it has a clear front that you can see through. So I thought to myself, why not try stencils on a piece of clear acetate? I trimmed a piece of acetate to 6 by 6, which is the same size as the stencil. I'm using my waffle flower silicone mat today because when I place this plastic in place, it doesn't shift around. I chose a stencil, in this case our bat stencil for Halloween, which I really like, and place it right over the acetate and tape it in place on the left and right sides. Then with a spatula knife and some glitter gel, you could also use a credit card. You'll want to evenly spread that gel across the entire stencil. And that's my dog jingling in the background. She said hello. I found if you just use a light touch, it doesn't make quite as big of a mess. Make sure you get every nook and cranny. Then remove your tape and gently peel up on the stencil. And you'll want to set that aside to dry. This is what the acetate looks like after the glitter gel has dried. It's really pretty on both sides. Perfect for a window card, like the one I made here. I mixed my own glitter this time. It started out looking like that, and then it kind of dried a little on the dull side. I'm not exactly sure why I used a clear gel medium. But when I opened it, I realized I probably should have used the back as the front because it's real sparkly on that side. But I liked it just the same. So the next time you want to add some sparkle and shine to some acetate, try this technique. One of the 2 layered stencils in this release is the fall leaf stencils. With the first layer, place it over your cardstock, and you ink it in with a light color of ink. Then you take the second layer of the stencil and you position it over the first one, and you would stencil that with a contrasting color of ink so you get a 2-tone effect. But rather than inking that second color, I decided to try a stippling technique using Copic pens. Let me show you how. Once again, I'm using my waffle flower silicone mat, and I place my cardstock down and it holds it in place. Choose the first layer of the stencil. This is the one with the full leaves cut out. Position it and tape it down. You're going to want to choose a pretty light color of ink for this first step. I chose Butternut by Altenew. It's a real pretty fall gold. And you just want to stencil all the openings with that ink. Then peel up your tape and remove your stencil. And you're going to want to let this piece dry completely. By the magic of video, I already have a piece I stenciled earlier and it's nice and dry. So take that second layer of the stencil and line it up over the first. You'll see half the leaves are covered and half are exposed. Make sure you get a good alignment and then tape it down. Then choose 2 Copic markers that are a little bit darker and then a lot darker than the color you stenciled. For my example, I'm using YR24 and YR27. So take the lighter of the 2 pens and come in here and just start tapping in some light dots. You don't want to be heavy-handed. And you want to fill in that entire leaf. Don't completely obliterate it. You do want some of the stenciling to show through. But you want to make sure that dot pattern goes all the way around that interior shape. Then take your darkest Copic and tap in on the stem and just along this inside part where a vein would be on a leaf. That'll give it some depth and dimension. Take that same dark color and just tap a few out in the lighter area. And when you lift up the stencil, the other half of the leaf will be filled in with Copic dots. On the example card I made, I used 4 different colors for my leaves, and I just masked them out using sticky note tape. But it's a simple, easy technique to do. It's a bit time consuming, but I really, really like the results. I also wanted to mention that this technique works well with other types of markers too. You don't have to use Copic markers or even alcohol markers. If you've got some Stabo markers, some Sharpies, pretty much whatever you have on hand, the technique will work as long as you have 2 colors that are in the same color family. One of the new stencils in this release is called Falling Snow. Honestly, it's just a cool random dot pattern, but I thought Falling Snow sounded so much more holiday-ish when it came time to name these products. I have a real fun technique for you to try using this stencil, some texture paste, and some Copic pens. To set up your stencil, go ahead and place your cardstock down on your work surface and add the Falling Snow stencil and tape it in place. This is the texture paste I'm using today. It's by Ranger and it is opaque. That's very important for this technique. So using a palette knife or a credit card, spread the texture paste all over the stencil. The trick for this technique is that it's really, really smooth. So you'll want to scrape it. You don't want any indentations or any kind of knife marks on that cardstock. When you're done, lift up your tape, peel up the stencil, and let that piece dry completely. Once the paste has dried, it'll be hard and have a smooth but kind of a chalky appearance. It's got some teeth to it, which is perfect for this technique. So here's the fun part. Choose a few colors of Copic, however many you want. In this case, I chose 4. You could also use any other kind of marker you might have on hand. It doesn't have to be an alcohol marker. And you just want to color in the tops of all those dots. Takes a little bit of time, but I think you'll agree the results are really, really fun. When I did this trick the first time, I thought, gosh, that would be such a fun background to a birthday card. But for my example today, I went with the holiday route, and I actually used very light colors of Copic. This is B00000 and 01. And I didn't color in every single dot either. I left some of them white because it is snow after all. And then when it was dry, I hit it with this Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen, and it just made everything have a nice shimmer and a bit of sparkle to it. So give this one a try. It is a lot of fun, and it will work with any marker you have on hand. This next technique is a shout out to all the crafters who love glitter, foils, and anything that sparkles. For this technique, I am using a thin sheet of cork, and I've trimmed it down just to make the process go a little quicker for you on screen. These come in 6x6 sheets, and I think they're made by Die Cuts with a View. I'm going to use the 2-part leaf stencil set again for this technique, and I'll start out with the full leaf layer first. I'm going to lay it over that cork and tape it down. Then I'm using this Deco Foil Transfer Gel. When it's dry, you can put a sheet of foil over it and transfer foil to the glue when it's dry. So I'm going to spread that over the cork. And you want to peel up that stencil and let that piece dry completely. It's dry when it's clear, so if there's even a little bit of cloudiness, make sure you let it dry all the way. Once the medium has dried clear, it's going to be very tacky to the touch, and this is when you're going to want to put a piece of foil transfer over it. And run this through your die cut machine so that it compresses the foil onto that gel. And when you do, peel back the foil, and those are the results. Very pretty, just like that is super pretty. But if you really want to get your sparkle on, bring in the second layer of the stencil set and line it up over the foil. Sorry, that was Tucker saying hello again. Tucker. Tape that down. And this is Sweet Mango, which is a coppery color just like the foil was. Run that over your stencil. Okay, lift your stencil up. Set that aside to dry. And when you're done, it will look like this after it is dried. Isn't that pretty? For my sample card, I did the same technique on a larger piece of cork. And I also cut my word out of cork. I really like how that looks. And then I cut the shadow of that word out of a piece of red cardstock. When I first set the blessings down onto the card, it kind of got lost. I think it was the whole cork on cork thing. So I put a piece of vellum in between the two layers, and I really like how that turned out. I love our 2-layer stencils because all the positioning is done for you. When you open up the package, you will see some etching right there of the PHOTOPLAY logo and then the name of the stencil, layer 1, layer 2. It really doesn't matter how you layer them, but those etchings actually help you know like where the top is, and if you don't want to think about lining them up, it does all the work for you. So if you stencil that layer first and then put that one directly over it, you'll get a really nice offsetting pattern. Another thing I like to do with these 2-layer designs is mix my mediums. And let me show you how. I'm going to stencil the first layer with blue dye-based ink. Tape down your stencil. Start in the center of each snowflake, pressing pretty firmly, and then lighten up your touch as you go out to the edges. You're going to want to let this layer dry before you do the next step. If you don't let it dry, then the next step is going to bleed into the ink while it's wet and smear it, or it won't look very good. So go ahead and let that layer dry. Now that that layer is dry, I'm going to place the second stencil over the top of it and tape it in place. Then I'm going to take some of this Glitz glitter gel. It's called Iridescent. And it's actually a clear gel with glitter in it. So when it dries, all you see is the glitter. And I'm going to spread that over the stencil. Lift up on that second stencil and let this layer dry completely. When that second layer dries, this is what it looks like. One of the things I like about this technique is how the blue from the first layer kind of shows through a little bit through the clear part of the glitter gel. For my card sample today, I had to repeat that process 2 times because the slim card is longer than the 6-inch stencil. Then I cut out the frame, the circle frame that matches the slim. So I have 3 windows with a little bit of the glitter and the stenciling peeking through. And the penguin is from the Penguins at Play stamp set. The Holly and Berry stencil set is probably my favorite one from this release. Like our other layered stencils, the logo, the name, and the layer number are etched in the bottom right corner. And that's important for this particular set so that the berries will line up with the holly leaves. So after you've stenciled the holly leaf and you put the berry layer down, as long as those logos are in the same corner, the berries will always match up. Simply inking each of these layers in green and red would be beautiful, but I decided to do things a little backwards for this next technique. I'm laying down the holly layer first, and I'm going to tape it in place. And then I'm going to use this texture paste, and make sure whatever one you use, it is opaque so that it dries white. And I'm going to spread that all over these holly leaves. Oh, I got a puppy hair in there. No surprise, considering I have 6 dogs. If that does happen to you, a trick I learned is to just take a needle and you can dig it out of the paste, but I'm not going to worry about it right now, in the interest of saving time. Pull up on your stencil and let this layer dry completely. Once the holly leaves dried, then I repeated the same steps using the berry layer and let those dry. So it's hard and kind of has a smooth, chalky feel to it. So for this technique, you're going to replace the holly layer directly over the leaves. You can kind of feel it lock into place. Tape that down. Then you're going to go in with some dye-based ink and a brush or a sponge, whatever you prefer for applying ink. And you're going to color the tops of all of that texture paste. When you're done, lift up that layer. As you can see, I got a little offset. I probably should have picked it up and lined it up better visually, but I think you get the idea. Then you come in with the berry layer and lay that down over the berries. Hopefully I'll do a better job of aligning this time. And tape that down. And apply red ink to all of the berries. And when you lift that layer up, all of the paste has been colored, so you get a lot of dimension. When you just color the tops, you can still see the paste when you look at it from the side. In my example, of course, I lined it up a whole lot better. I applied 2 colors of green and 2 colors of red just to give it a little bit more depth. And then I cut out the Mary word die 3 times, glued them together, and added the sentiments around the word. Single layer stenciling is really pretty, but to add depth and dimension, or even to introduce another color, a second layer is key. As you can see here, I already stenciled the first layer of this pine cone stencil. And I'm going to go in and just shift it slightly. You can either rotate it or flip it over, but you're trying to go to an area where there isn't a complete pine cone. I think that looks pretty good. Take that down and go one shade darker with your ink from the first shade that you used. And stencil it in again. When you're done, just lift up your tape and stencil. And already it's just added so much depth and dimension to that original pattern. In my card sample here, I did the same 2 layers, and this is the little Santa Lumberjack from our original O Canada collection. For this last card, the technique came quite by accident. My original plan was to clear heat emboss this snow stencil over white cardstock, like I've done here. I just placed the stencil and I used a dauber and I tapped it into Versamark, tapped it all over, and then I sprinkled it with clear embossing powder and heat set it. The plan was then I would ink the piece so that when the ink was down, all those dots would show through like this. I think that gives you a good idea of where I was going with this. But when I got it all done and I die cut the large tree, this is the die cut for the Trimetry for the slim card. I honestly did not like how the dots looked after they had been inked. Not sure why, but it wasn't gelling for me. So I got to looking at it and I thought, well, I've got all these dots here. Actually, it shows me pretty good placement for sequins. So I just came in and everywhere there was a white dot, I added a sequin. I think a technique like this works best when you use a larger die cut so you have more dots to choose from. Before I go, I wanted to leave you with one final tip. It's very important when you're using stencils that you clean them right after you use them. When I'm working on projects like this, that isn't always convenient, so I keep a dish of warm soapy water on my desk and I put each stencil into it as I'm using them. Then when I'm finished with the projects, I take the whole dish to my sink and I wash them one by one. I hope you've learned a new trick or technique today in using all of these new stencils from Say It With Stamps. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting subscribe below. We have many more how-to videos in the works. Stay safe and healthy, and thanks for stopping by.